Good day, this is Bill Collier. I am going to begin to introduce you to some very different concepts. These concepts, these ideas will lead you potentially to a different way of thinking, and a different way of acting and interacting with people and with the world around you. For many decades, the Christian church, Christians in general, have questioned why our societies throughout the West, including Europe, America, and in many locations around the world that are influenced by the West, are in such spiritual and moral decline. It is often complained that the church, that Christianity has no relevance and no influence on this culture, because the current culture has more influence on your daily life as a Christian than you probably have on the culture around you. The exceptions do not prove the rule. In other words, you can point to a person or an organization and say they are influencing the people around them or the society around them, or their community, and maybe that's true. But by and large, that is not the case. And what is more, often, even where that is true, you would have a hard time proving to anyone that these changes are going to be long-lasting or that they have been long-lasting. The issue at hand is whether or not we influence this culture or this culture influences us. At least that's really kind of how it has been framed. There are entire movements that are dedicated to the proposition of changing or influencing this current culture. Where I want to challenge you, and I want to make you think, is in exploring institutions, structures, and organizations that have historically existed and which are not very well represented in society today. They're not represented in secular society, and they're not represented in Christian society. And when I talk about some of these concepts, they will seem so alien to you, a modern citizen of a country in Western civilization's circle. They'll seem so new and different and unheard of to you that you will barely recognize them. I will have to explain them in detail. And when I speak of them, you will probably misunderstand them and misapply their meaning. One of the concepts is the concept of the nation. We are seeing a lot of people talk about nationalism in its different forms, from economic nationalism to ethnic nationalism. None of these concepts really gets to the heart of what a nation actually is, at its most fundamental level of what a nation is, which in these discussions we will get into. Suffice it to say, it is more probable than not that most of the people listening to my voice will have a misunderstanding of what a nation is from a biblical and an historical perspective. When you understand what a nation truly is, and you understand that that's actually the starting point, and then you can begin to realign your life and your relationships, and you can begin to realize that the question is not whether we influence this culture or whether this culture influences us. The question is, what culture do we choose to be connected to? What culture do we choose to build? We are human beings. We are born into a corporate body, family, community, nation. And without that corporate body, we would not literally, physically survive. So, what culture do we want to be part of? What culture do we want to build? This actually comes down to the question of our national identity. And we choose our national identity. There are those who think that people's blood or ancestry determines who and what they are or can be for the most part. Even when they disagree, even when they say there may be exceptions, pretty much they believe in a sort of ethno-nationalism. And there are others whose concept of nationalism is purely political or purely economic. What I'm going to propose to you is that your national identity really should be primarily spiritual, and then socioeconomic, or excuse me, not socioeconomic, I apologize, sociocultural, and then economic. And only then, after you have such a national community that is cohesive, can you consider your interactions with the political powers that be in this world. But your interaction with those political powers is not what defines you, and your existence as a national people is not rooted in a political entity. Political states and nations are two very separate, distinguishable things. The nation state is a combination of a nation and a state. I hope to show you, if you continue to listen to me, I hope to show you that the nation state is for the most part an unrealized myth. There are very few cases where there are true nation states. And that most nations in this world are not associated with a political state. These nations actually exist. I am not describing what theoretically could be. I'm actually talking to you about what is. And when you understand what is, and when you understand the true essence of what a nation is, and the biblical worldview regarding nations and their role in human civilization, then you will begin to understand why the question is not whether or not we influence this culture or this culture influences us. The question is whether or not we choose a culture or we build a culture based on our ideals and our beliefs as Christians. When you get to that point, you will begin to see why there is so many problems in our society and why there is so little influence in our society coming from the Christian world. What we can do to solve that problem is not an individual thing. You can do things as an individual, and you have to be engaged as an individual. But the solution is not merely what you do as an individual. It is how you connect with other people, how you become cohesive and unified with other people toward a shared vision or goal. We are not made to be a lone individual. We are made to be connected individuals. Still individuals, but also connected. So this begins our lecture series. Well, not really a series. It'll more or less be the things that come to my mind about this subject matter. Thank you for listening.
Aww.